Hello, my name is Dr. Nick Bowman. I'm an Associate Professor of Journalism and Creative Media at Texas Tech University. I'm going to present very briefly on behalf of Tim Wolf, who is at Munich, John Velas, who is at Indiana University, and Johannes Brauer, who is at Gises Institute of Cologne. Our team's been working for several years on a variety of projects focused on nostalgia in video games. And the one we're going to talk about today very briefly is on the extent to which the video game controller can be a source of nostalgia. Our data and our materials are freely shared online using the link on your screen. This is still an in-progress manuscript, but nonetheless, we're happy to show you where we're at so far, and we're happy to take any feedback you may have for our team. The paper is currently under review. The big idea in this research is that we know that nostalgia is a sensory experience. We can think about smells from our past or our favorite music or seeing road signs and logos and things of that nature. And of course, when we're talking about mediated nostalgia, oftentimes it's that stuff on screen that we remember. Anyone who's played Mario before probably is already humming or singing the song in the background in their mind right now while they're looking at this image. Apparently this kid's about to die. That Mario's not doing very well. Of course, the game's not even in the console, but the point is we have this memory. If we look at the screen here, you know, some of the other elements of my gaming experience may be vague, but boy, that screen sure is drawn into focus. And the other aspect of nostalgia that sometimes gets overlooked in media research is touch. In this case, the controller itself and holding that rectangular device and having learned how to use that controller for decades of my life might also bring with it some nostalgia. Anybody who's ever gone to a junkyard or an antique store and been told to stop touching things understands what I mean about the nostalgia of touch. And so we're wondering if that handheld controller can be a source of nostalgia that could sharpen this entire image and really remind us of our prior gaming experiences. Now, when I say nostalgia, I'm talking about that bittersweet longing for our past. But we have to make it clear that there are differences. So there's personal nostalgia, a bittersweet longing for your own experiences. So even on our research team, not everybody on the team is really old enough to necessarily have owned a Nintendo. I tend to be the senior statesman of the group. And so I recall having this controller in my hand. And in fact, I still have this very device in my office at home. And then there is, of course, historical nostalgia when we want other people's experiences. And so, you know, Nintendo in 2016 re-released the Nintendo Entertainment System. And what's interesting is that, you know, with newer technology, they were able to use a much smaller console, but they kept that controller the exact same size. They even re-upped their patent on the controller design. So folks could play in 2016 with the same device as the games available in 1985. So we wanted to know if these controller consistencies could actually have some effect on the nostalgia from gaming. We had folks play Super Mario Brothers. It's a very well-known video game, and it was the perfect stimulus for manipulating the controller system while keeping the gameplay constant. The paper explains this all in greater detail. The highlights here is that we did an experiment with 4 conditions, about 167 people, cut short due to COVID, unfortunately. Our average range, because we wanted to get people who were young and old, we recruited from the broader campus community. And we got folks from 17 to 59, largely male sample, a white majority, but in our community in West Texas, we have a lot of Hispanic and Latinx individuals. Folks in the study had played games before, played games in the past, and about 60% of them had played Mario using that original controller in some way. For the study, we manipulated whether or not they got to use that original controller, expecting this one to lead to the highest levels of nostalgia, and rather compare that to these other controllers, one of which was a modern version of the original NES controller, the other one being more of a modern Xbox, PlayStation pistol grip style controller that still had the functionality of the original. And there's reason to believe that this might be more familiar with younger gamers, and therefore it can make this thing a little more foreign to them. And in fact, in all of if you read our paper in more detail, you'll see that we presented research questions around these different types of controllers and these different types of nostalgia we were studying. So In the study, we set it up to where everybody was either playing or watching, and we simulcast all the gameplay to people in another room watching the same gameplay. And the reason that we did that was we didn't want to use pre-recorded videos, because then it would result in people who watched all seeing the exact same game, but people who played getting different experiences based on their game skill. So whenever this person was playing with the NES controller, this person was watching that person's gameplay. And we did all of this through HDMI splitters, and we mirrored all the screens in real time. The technology worked fantastically, and I'm happy to chat with folks who are interested in this kind of setup. Short story here is the controller didn't matter, and in fact, nostalgia was invariant across all conditions, in part because it was quite high. People simply saw Mario, felt personally nostalgic. Lower levels of historical nostalgia also didn't differ. The point here is the controller did not seem to matter. What did seem to matter for nostalgia was that if you had played Mario in the past, and if you were a gamer, you were more likely to play Mario or watch Mario and feel nostalgia for your own prior game experience. If you were younger in the study, you felt a lot more historical nostalgia for the generations before you. And whether you perceived your performance or the person who you were watching's performance as being higher, you felt more nostalgia broadly, and that could be something along the lines of a carryover effect that, perceived performance is a good feeling, and it kind of helps you feel these other good feelings, such as nostalgia. We also asked folks to write about their experiences, and we found 3 quick findings here. We used an emergent theme analysis, which I'm happy to talk about later. The NES controller was by far seen as most natural for Mario, and that kind of makes sense. It's the one that we're used to. When folks use that kind of NES controller, they talked a lot less about game mechanics, and we wonder if it's because they were seeing a break here. And likewise, when folks use that pistol grip controller, they talked a lot more about past generations. It may have been a bit of a contrast effect, and we explain this in the paper in more detail. Our takeaways. Because nostalgia didn't differ, one idea is that you may not have to replay video games to necessarily feel nostalgic for them. And it could explain the popularity of retro streaming, for example. There's so much nostalgia caught up in the viewing that the playing additionally didn't add much more to it. Although performance did help a little bit. We also love that those younger players felt more historic nostalgia because it gives more evidence to that construct of feeling nostalgic for somebody else's past. We'd love to stay in more detail. Be in touch with us. Here's how you can choose your player. We're happy to answer questions you might have. Thank you for your time.